26th of July movement began on the 26th with a failed attack on the Moncada barracks in Santiago de Cuba, led by Fidel Castro. Although some revolutionaries die, Castro escapes. However, he is eventually found and jailed. While in jail, Castro reads communist texts such as the Communist Manifesto and begins to embrace the ideology of communism. He leaves jail under amnesty and travels to Mexico to gain revolutionary support. Here he meets Che Guevara and plans to wage guerrilla war against Cuba and its government under Batista. However, upon arrival, the revolutionaries were ambushed by Cuban military units, leading them to flee to the Sierra Maestras. Here Castro gains a lot of support for his revolution, especially from the rural population, and returns to successfully overthrow Batista's government. Batista flees the country with several $100 million. Castro obtains oil trade with the Soviet Union in exchange for sugar. In response, US companies deny the refining of Soviet oil. Castro then nationalizes Cuba's oil supply, which greatly upsets the US, as it was one of the largest losses in US assets in history. President Eisenhower organized the training of Cuban exiles for an attack against Cuba under Castro. These exiles were inherited by President John F. Kennedy and given approval for the attack, which became the Bay of Pigs invasion in April of 1961, which resulted in a great failure and led to Castro seeking Soviet support from the US. After these events, Operation Mongoose was formed with many plans to get rid of Castro, from starting rebellions inside the country to multiple assassination attempts. There was an increase in espionage in Cuba, leading to constant flights of US spy planes over the nation. Relationships with Cuba is worsened as policies are passed such as the Alliance for Progress, in fear that Cuba will turn communist. Eventually, tensions peak with the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Soviet nuclear missiles are found in Cuba by US spy planes. The US utilizes blockades and scare tactics to prevent the Soviet Union from installing a nuclear launch site in Cuba, so close to the US. It ends with compromise between the US and USSR, where the Soviet Union would take out the missiles from Cuba with the promise that the US would not invade Cuba and that they would remove missiles from Turkey. Castro passed economic policies such as the 10 million ton harvest in aims to propel Cuba's economy forward. Agencies such as the National Institute for Agrarian Reform was formed by the government in order to institute the Agrarian Reform Law of 1959. The government also supported the National Association of Small Farmers, which promoted the interest of smaller farmers in Cuba by providing things such as interest-free loans.
You know what? I don't like Castro.
Censorship was enforced as the press releases had to be approved by government. Social policies were passed such as the creation of free healthcare, with hospitals being built in many remote cities that didn't have access to medical aid before. Education was given priority as a literacy program was formed, with hundreds of literacy centers being opened around the country. By 2000, 97% of Cubans aged 15 to 24 were literate. Support and equal opportunity for women came with the FMC, the Federation of Cuban Women, with the goal to mobilize women to support the revolution. In an attempt to address racism, Castro issued anti-discrimination laws, in an attempt to close the class gap between races. And that wraps it up. Thank you for watching this crash course for Cuba under Castro.